Right, the second section is called The Foreign Conquest of China, the Rise of the Manchu. Just west of Japan, the huge country of China was also struggling with foreign ideas and foreign invaders. But these foreign invaders didn't come from the west, they came from China itself. For centuries, China had been ruled by a family of emperors called the Ming dynasty. The Ming family came from the south of China, where the people were known as Han Chinese. The Ming emperors and the people they ruled were both Han Chinese. They spoke the same language, ate the same foods, wrote in the same alphabet, wore the same clothes. But in the northern part of China, in an area called Manchuria, a warlike group of people had come to hate the Ming dynasty. The leader of these Manchu people complained that Han Chinese soldiers came into Manchuria, stole food and drove farmers from their land. He grew so angry he took a battle oath called the 7 Hatreds for the Ming dynasty and set out to attack the borders of the Ming Empire. The Ming Empire braced itself for the foreign invasion of the Manchu, but another threat was rising within China itself. For years, Ming China had been growing poorer and hungrier. The emperors had spent a tremendous amount of money fighting off Hideyoshi of Japan. And while they were spending money, China was growing. There were now 160 million people in China, and there was not enough farmland to grow enough food for them all. The weather had grown colder. Unexpected frosts killed orange trees and young crops. Grain was scarce and expensive. Soon the army ran out of money to pay or feed its troops. Soldiers began to desert. They joined up with bands of hungry peasants and roamed through China, robbing and destroying cities. Meanwhile, the Manchu launched attacks on cities in the north of China. The Han Chinese complained, "We're surrounded by battle, unsafe in our own homes, and the emperor does nothing to help us." One Chinese government official, a postman named Li Zuchen, decided to set up his own government in place of the Ming. He gathered hungry and discontented men around him and marched his army towards the capital city of Peking. He was ready to fight for the throne, but when he reached Peking, no soldiers appeared on the city's walls. Li Zucheng's army approached cautiously. They pushed open the city gates. No Ming army stood ready to fight. The Ming soldiers, hungry and ragged, had been struck by plague. They were dead or had fled the city. Li Zucheng marched toward the palace in triumph. As he approached, the last Ming emperor hung himself in his royal chambers. The Ming dynasty had ended. But Li Zucheng would not be the new emperor of China. Down in the south of China, the remains of the Ming family and army gathered together, hoping to take the throne back. One of the Ming generals sent a message to the Manchu, who was still rampaging through the north of China. "We were once enemies," the general wrote, "but now we can join together and defeat this rebel peasant and his army." That was a mistake. The Manchu were happy to help out. They swept down from the north and drove Li Zucheng out of Peking. And then, instead of putting the Ming back on the throne, they claimed the throne of China and began a new ruling dynasty of their own, a Manchu dynasty. Now China was ruled by a people who were not Han Chinese. The peasant emperor had been defeated, but a foreign emperor sat on China's throne. Now the Manchu ruled over an entire country full of Han Chinese. The Manchu thought of themselves as superior to the Han Chinese. They called themselves the Qing, a word which means pure. They refused to live in the same neighbourhoods as their Han Chinese subjects. Manchu and Han Chinese boys and girls didn't play together, and they weren't allowed to marry each other when they grew up. And as a sign of their control over the Han Chinese, the Manchu forced their subjects to cut their hair in the Manchu style. Han Chinese men believed that hair was a gift from family ancestors, so they grew their hair very long. But Manchu men shaved the front of their heads and braided the hair in the back with a long queue, or pigtail. The Han Chinese thought that shaving your forehead was a barbaric, uncivilized practice, showing disrespect for ancestors. When the Manchu ordered them to start wearing pigtails, the Chinese revolted. They gathered to expose their Manchu overlord, shouting, "Keep your hair, even if you lose your head!" The Manchu were ruthless. They crushed the rebellions, executed the ringleaders, and forced their subjects to shave. The first Manchu emperor treated the Han Chinese like slaves. He put his Manchu countrymen into positions of authority and made the Han Chinese officials serve them. But the second Manchu emperor, Kang Shi, changed all that. Kang Shi inherited the throne when he was only 7. His regents had served the first Manchu emperor. Like the first emperor, they looked down on the Han Chinese and treated them like servants and slaves. But even as a child, Kang Shi realised that the Manchus were outnumbered by the Han Chinese, and they would not be able to keep control of this huge empire if they treated their subjects with scorn. And although Kang Shi was loyal to his Manchu countrymen, he also loved the country of China. At the age of 13, Kang Shi took power for himself. He fired his regents and set about gaining the support of the Han Chinese. He announced that all Chinese subjects, whether Manchu or Han Chinese, could gain favour and promotion at his court. He told the Han Chinese, "We've not conquered you, we have freed you. No longer will you have to worry about Ming soldiers stealing your crops or the Ming emperors demanding high taxes." And so that the Han Chinese would feel liberated instead of enslaved, he reduced taxes. Soon the Han Chinese peasants were paying less taxes than ever before. Kang Xi's strategies worked. Hatred for the Manchu rulers began to diminish as the people of China grew richer. Under Kang Xi, China became stronger and bigger as his army conquered other nations nearby and added them to the Manchu Empire. For 50 years, this foreign invader ruled over his adopted country and made it one of the largest and wealthiest nations in the world. So you've got some more questions that you can answer about this section, about the Manchus, and then there is some map work. So there's a map and then some questions so you can really see where all these different things were happening in the world. And then there's an activity that you can do as well. And it would be lovely at 2:30 if we can all zoom in and show each other our activity that we've done. It's a Zen garden. And so if you have been able to make a Zen garden, you can zoom in to the code that Mrs. Kuiper will have sent through so that we can share the work that we've done then. So we'll hopefully see you a little bit later to share things together.